10 seconds. All right, I'm going to have you talk to your partner for just 1 minute, focusing on 2 questions. 1, how does the tone and the message and the purpose of this inaugural address differ from his first? What's different about this one? And maybe what's similar? And 2, what do you think he wants to do with the South? How is he going to want to treat the South? Mostly based on the last paragraph. All right? Those 2 questions. How is this similar and or different than the first inaugural address that we looked at last Thursday? And 2, what do you think he wants? How does he want to treat the South, the Confederacy, based specifically on the last paragraph? 1 minute. Chat. Go. What does he say? What does he blame for?
Yeah, so like pretty much
Like
like what he's talking
he
about.
calls them
Like,
insurgents.
he's like, oh, when he blames the South for like
The slaves?
having like believing that they were gonna
Very different.
because the South believed that Lincoln was gonna take away the slavery, but he wasn't. But then they took it that way, so then that's why they seceded. He thinks that that was the blame. He blames them.
20 seconds. Give me some good answers.
Because he wants to keep unity, like union, so he doesn't want to be too harsh or too lenient with that.
All right. So talk to me. Ms. Vargas. How is this similar and or different to what he was trying to get across in his first inaugural address?
In the first address, he tries to present the idea of a civil war.
Uh-huh.
And save the Union. And here he doesn't stress it too much because he feels like the Union is safe.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree with that. Please build on that for me, Eric. You're making a good point over there. First time in about 4.5 months. So give it to us.
I saw a difference because in his first inaugural address, like he said he wasn't gonna get involved with slavery, he wasn't on either side. But in this one, like most of the pieces right here that these things constitute for peculiar and powerful interest, all knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war.
Okay. So he lays out very specific. Who does he blame for the war in this case? Yeah, very clearly. He says these insurgents are built on one thing, right? Extending, perpetuating, making forever the institution of slavery. Yeah, absolutely. So, at least in that aspect, this is a less union-driven address and a more like we won, get over it address. But it shifts a little bit at the very end. Mr. Vargas, based on the last paragraph, how do you think he wants to treat the Confederacy?
He's not going to treat them really too harsh because it's their own people, and he also mentions that they both read the same Bible and the same God.
In that case, if we all go with the same Bible, then man, life is good.
Peace for all nations.
Yeah. Then we have to bind up the nation's wounds. That's a super important Lincoln document. It's a very important line. It's a very famous line. With malice. What's malice?
Like
Evil, anger, yeah, towards none. We're not angry at anybody. Charity towards all. Firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in. And to cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. I argue that that last line is really a continuation of his message in the Gettysburg Address. When he says it's up to us, the living, to make sure that those who gave their lives here have not died in vain. Yeah. And this new birth of freedom, he's really continuing that theme of, now that we had this conflict, like it's our job to make sure that we fix it and that it doesn't happen again. So I want you to keep that in your heads, that Lincoln's idea on reconstructing the South, on punishing the South is not necessarily so harsh, but on really fixing the problems and moving forward as a nation. And how that really is a continuation of the Gettysburg Address. Cool. So the war is over. It ends at Appomattox Courthouse. That is not a courthouse. Appomattox is the town. Courthouse is the place in Appomattox. Lee surrenders to Grant. Robert E. Lee, who has been in charge of the Confederate forces in the Eastern Theater since the Peninsula Campaign, where McClellan moved too slow and the war could have been over. But keep in mind that these Confederates lay down their arms, but don't lay down their cause. They stop fighting there, but they don't stop believing in what they were fighting for in the first place. We see a significant amount of guerrilla warfare happening after surrender, where small Confederate groups or regiments don't want to stop fighting, and they keep fighting until the end. And then there becomes this theme that I'll hit on next week as well, and then going forward, that the South will rise again. So you may have beaten us this time. I know, it's a ridiculous notion here in 2017. I'm waiting for the South to rise at all. On anything. I don't know, education, spelling, dental work. The South will rise again, which, of course, as we know, has not happened yet. So April 9th of 1865, the war is officially over. It's 2017 and nobody has told Texas. And it's over. We're done. Congratulations. We have fought a war for Union. To my point from Monday, the end justifies the means. Lincoln maybe crossed some lines to get where we got, but he was fighting for Union the whole time, and Union is restored. Now, why did the Union win?
They had a lot of advantages.
A lot of advantages, absolutely. From 1863 to 65, really the lack of Southern resources, militarily, economically, food, and then, of course, the lack of Southern unity. Right? They lost some public support, meaning you can't fight a war that way, as well as the North, the Union finally pushing into the Confederacy with Vicksburg, with the siege of Richmond here, with Sherman's march to the sea and north. That ends the Civil War. It's that easy. So my question for you is quite simply, did the Union win the Civil War, or did the Confederacy lose the Civil War? It's a good question, right? Take 30 seconds. Think about it. Talk to your partner. Did the Union win it, or did the Confederacy lose it? Go.
I think it's the South.
That's a good question, huh?
It's more than, yeah. I feel like they were more impacted by this that they initially to gain their own independence and be their own state, whereas they was completely taught.
Yeah, fair. Same idea. Like, did you win it, or did they lose it?
Like slavery eventually.
You don't say. Is it the same thing?
They lost their resources and eventually had to come back.
All right. So let me stop here for a second. What kind of government did the Confederacy create?
A weak government.
Yes, Confederate States of America. What do they want strengthened?
States' rights.
States' rights. Okay, cool. So they wanted what kind of federal government? Don't all speak up at once. All right, a weak federal government. Okay, cool. With a weak Congress. And what do they rely on to win the war? Cotton. There we go. The original weapon of mass destruction. Destruction of the South. Is this a good way to fight a war effort? No. Is this a good way to maintain public support? No. What government does theirs most resemble in our history?
The Articles of Confederation.
Yeah, the Articles of Confederation. Interesting. Was that a successful government?
No.
No. Oh my God. Okay, so that's my argument for the Confederacy losing the Civil War. What's my argument for the Union winning the Civil War? What does the Union do to win the Civil War? What do you think? Okay, cool. Anaconda Plan. That's fair. Is that a short-term or a long-term plan? Yeah, it's long-term. What does Lincoln do? Besides die. Yeah, besides die. That's my next slide. Don't worry. What does Lincoln do? Emancipation Proclamation. That allows emancipation, Gettysburg Address. What else?
Conscription.
Conscription. What does Congress do? Yes, income tax. Good job. Got to pay for it.
More infrastructures.
Yeah, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yes. What does Congress do? I don't know. 40 years ago, they started industrializing with Clay's American System. Yes. So my big takeaway for you here is that sure, both are true. The Confederacy lost the Civil War. They had advantages, especially early in the war. They weren't able to take advantage of long term. And yes, the Union took great steps to win the war. But this war was won and lost in the 60 years prior to the Civil War. It was lost by the Confederacy for believing in the idea that you can have a strong, stable government built on states' rights. It didn't last 4 years. It was won by the Union by investing in infrastructure and railroad and manufacturing in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. It was won by the Union by being an attractive destination for immigrants in the 40 years prior to the Civil War, and then also during the Civil War. So, as usual, my answer to this question is both. Yes. Did the Union win or did the Confederacy lose? Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, I just wanted us to get that frame of reference. And this is just my opinion, based on a moderate amount of knowledge, that this war was won and lost in the 1820s, in the 1830s, and the 1840s, and the 1850s, and then, of course, in the 1863 to 65, as the wars actually won. But once we have these two distinct societies built on their two distinct characteristics, it's only a matter of time until the Union wins this war. There we go. Now, we can make an argument that if Lincoln loses the election in 1864, the war doesn't go that way, but he does win. And I don't believe in playing what-ifs. Like, what if you did your homework? I don't know. It obviously doesn't happen, so we don't play that what-if game. So, the Northern celebration is incredibly short-lived. As shortly after the surrender, as we see, despite the fact that he has dislocated his left shoulder to try to stop John Wilkes Booth in the painting, Abraham Lincoln takes a bullet to the back of the head and dies. And dies.
Why does he have a knife?
Because John Wilkes Booth came prepared. He's not here to play no games. Abraham Lincoln is dead. Thank you, John Wilkes Booth, who, funny enough, is a very famous actor.
What?
Yeah, that would be like equivalent to Matthew McConaughey killing President Trump right now. Well, let's not get carried away. This video's going to go on YouTube. Let's not get excited. I don't want to get arrested tomorrow by the Orange Police. Please.
On the packet, it says who wins the assassination.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. That's my question, not your question. So let's think about this. Lincoln's dead. Short term, who's pissed?
Union.
Yes, the North. Now, we don't go Union anymore because the war's over. The North is pissed. Who's happy? Yeah, we killed him. Yeah, a little too late. As usual, like the South attempting to industrialize, it's too little too late. So short term, the South looks at this like, yeah, we did it. We killed Lincoln. Funny enough, we can consider Lincoln the last casualty of the Civil War. But we just read his second inaugural address. How did he want to treat the South? Oh yeah, let's just bring him back into the family. Just a little slap on the wrist. Not so bad. Is that so bad? Well, not so bad. And now he's dead. Now we're going to have all of these Republicans in Congress that are chomping at the bit to punish the South for what they've done. And with a Lincoln in charge, he can maybe keep them corralled. So it's more of an existential question, right? A transcendentalist question, if you will. Maybe Bush can come answer it. Of would the South have been better off if Lincoln had lived? Now, another question for you. What's harder? War or peace?
Peace.
So, could we make an argument? Because now when you do these stupid rankings on the best presidents of all time, I believe James Buchanan is the best by far. When you do these rankings, you see Lincoln at the very least in the top 3. Would he have been in the top 3 if he had to deal with the peace? Could we make an argument that by Lincoln being assassinated, his legacy is saved? He goes out on top. He wins the war, he saves the Union, and then he dies. He doesn't have to deal with the consequences of the war, but we do. So really it's just a question for you of like, is there such a thing as a president, as a politician, as a public figure of dying at the right time? And does that then impact your legacy? I mean, there's no right time to die. I mean, it sucks, he dies. But like legacy-wise, and once we go into Reconstruction, I'll ask you the same question. I'm like, is it possible that by not having to deal with putting the country back together, Lincoln actually comes out on top, despite being down at the bottom of the ground? So just something to kick around in your heads. That's all. We have an incredible manhunt, the largest reward offered in American history to that time of $100,000. That's a lot of money. $100,000 for the murderer of our late, dead, beloved President Abraham Lincoln. And then a smaller reward for other people that were associated with the crime. It was a large conspiracy. His Secretary of War was supposed to die the same night. Somebody got chicken and didn't do it. But they get caught. They get put on a very quick trial, and they get executed. Here's the picture, if you wanted a morbid start to your Wednesday. The 4 perpetrators of Lincoln's assassination being hung. Yeah, I think so. Yes, Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George. So these are all co-conspirators. None of these are John Wilkes Booth, because he is killed by a Union Army member upon his capture. So, but the 4 people also associated in the planning are caught, and they are put on a very, very, very quick trial. Are they guilty? Yes, hang them. And they are hung in public, and then they die. That's usually how hanging works. So the war's over. Lincoln's dead. The Union is restored. And now let's take a look at the cost. For the Union, it's impossible to get specifically accurate numbers because it's 1865. But these are approximates. 110,000 Union soldiers or civilians killed in action. That's a lot of people. In the Confederacy, only 93,000 killed in action. But in terms of percentage of their population, this is a way bigger number. Because if we looked at the beginning on my graph, they had 71% of the population, they had 29. So way bigger chunk of the population. More people than that die from war effects, illness, disease, bad water, explosive diarrhea. It's one of the leading causes of death in the Civil War because of drinking bad water. Keep in mind, 70% of the war is fought in that, 300-mile box between D.C. and Richmond. So there's dead bodies, horse waste, human waste, all in the same rivers that everybody's drinking out of for the next 4 years. So I know, it's lovely. Huh? You guys complain about our water fountains.
7K.
Yeah. And the Union has many more wounded than the Confederacy. The total dead is approximately $625,000 people. For the North, the war cost $2.3 billion, or $54 billion in today's money. For the South, about $1 billion, but the destruction of their property, thanks Sherman, of their railroads, their factories, and the like, is about $1.5 billion as well. So the war is incredibly expensive. Looking at our numbers, there are It's basically an equal amount of dead people from the Civil War as the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, the Iraq War, and Afghanistan up to I stopped this count in 2012. It's basically the same amount of dead people for every other war in American history as the American Civil War. Why is that? Because on this side, in this war, both sides, North and South, Union and Confederate, both sides in the conflict are Americans. When you fight yourself, of course, the war is going to cost more, both in people and in money and in repairs. Right? Is the U.S. responsible for paying to rebuild Mexico after the Mexican-American War? No. But after the Civil War, we have to rebuild the United States because it's all in the same country. Very expensive. Another reason that casualties are so high, as I mentioned on Monday, is we're still fighting an old school style war where everybody's just hanging out in a big field shooting each other. An old school style war with big formations of people. Frontal assault, meaning we charge at each other, facing each other, which leads to huge casualty rates because we're doing that with new technology. Here was a picture from Gettysburg where there's just got dead people in it. Civil War people. In all of these eastern battlefields, like in Antietam, like at Gettysburg, like a First and Second Bull Run, Chancellorsville, Fredericksburg, all these people are just buried 3 feet under the ground as the armies move on to the next place. So this huge undertaking of a cause after the war to unearth these people, find out where they're from, send them home to their families and bury them properly is a huge undertaking for society. It's where for the first time we get national cemeteries, where we bury our soldiers that have died in combat. So you have to understand that with this many dead people in a small area for the most part, in Maryland and much more so Virginia, it's a lot of bodies. There's another way to look at it. Just showing you, those of you that are more visual instead of numerical learners, that there's a lot more dead people in the Civil War than ever there were. All right. So let's talk effects. I left an organizer on your paper. There are some significant political changes that we need to talk about. There are some significant economic changes that are worth talking about. And there are some really, really important social changes as well. First political change is we've established for a fact, despite I would argue it having already been established as a fact, that the national federal government has supremacy, sovereignty, power over our state governments. We've dealt with this issue. There's no more nullification. There's no more secession. You tried, it failed. Get over it, move on. Our federal government has authority over states, has supremacy. That's a political change, because now it is a reaffirming of what Marshall would have said in McCulloch, Maryland, right, of what Washington would have said of this entire Federalist and then later Whig ideology. The federal government has supremacy, deal with it. Also important politically, without any Southern opposition, the Republicans in Congress are able to pass a whole bunch of new laws that are, go figure, in line with Republican ideology. A free soil ideology, a federal government ideology, a infrastructure ideology. Right? The Republicans really pick up where Clay and the Whigs would have left off. Where the federal government should pay for infrastructure. And the federal government should subsidize or help pay for people spreading out. Who's going to spread out? These poor middle-class farmers. This northern American dream of free soil. Homestead Act, the Morrill Land Grant Act, very important. We have a new tariff. So the South's going to come back in the country and be so pissed off. No slaves, new tariff, strong federal government, life sucks. They should have just left us alone. Sorry. Land grants, we'll get into this in period 6 a lot, but giving land to railroad companies so that railroads will expand across the country. So really, really using the federal government to encourage infrastructure, to encourage growth, right? Picking up that idea from a Hamilton in the 1790s and Whig Clay in 1820s and 30s. A new national banking system. It's not a new national bank. We don't get another one of those for a while, but it's a new national banking system. And a long-term effect is the balance of political power has shifted from the South to the North. That's because of population. We looked at that in the electoral map of 1860. But it's also because the South just bounced and let us pass whatever laws we wanted for 4 years. Here is a whole breakdown. Don't worry, you're not going to write this down. Don't panic. I put this slide in the presentation, so when you all go and look at it later online, you have more information. So when the 5 of you later go and look at it online. A couple things I want to point out. Homestead Act, though. Literally encouraging poor people, largely immigrants, to go farm the Midwest. Here's the Midwest. Right there. Go farm there. We'll give you land for a very cheap price if you go farm it for 5 years. All right? Super important. Also important political effects, precedent-wise, it should be in your notes, is that now the federal government can kind of sort of infringe on civil liberties during war. Lincoln did it and it worked. Therefore, the federal government does kind of have a little more flexibility and leeway. I want to talk about this a lot in the second semester, right? With things like Japanese internment and things like the restriction of civil liberties during World War I, or a new Alien and Sedition Act, basically. We'll get into that as well. So there's this new precedent that the federal government can do it kind of what they want to win a war, if the ends justifies means. We begin construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, linking East and West Coast for the first time, really shrinking America, making it way easier to get across coast to coast. That's important. And really importantly, a massive expansion, as we looked at the beginning of today, of federal power. Those are our political effects. Economically, we see the North financing the war by selling war bonds, right? Short-term loans to the government that will be paid back later. And that's not even enough to pay for the war. They raise the tariffs. They start issuing paper money for the first time. We have, not the first time, but one of the first times we have money that's not backed by gold, just paper money. And we'll get into that a lot in period 6 as well, because this is going to lead to a huge issue on what to do with all this paper money after the war. If the federal government issued it, why isn't it worth anything anymore? Very importantly, though, we've really modernized the northern economy. Something the South has refused to do since the beginning of time, modernization of the economy. The problem, the con of this, is that in the North, workers' wages, how much money people make, does not keep up with the amount prices are going up. Right? So people's wages are going up, but prices are going up more. So therefore people have less buying power, less spending power. All right? The Civil War, more than anything else, is going to lead to the massive American industrialization that we see in period 6. Right? The Northern investment in infrastructure and manufacturing. We got to spend that money somewhere, and in period 6, America's going to go through a massive industrialization. Massive. Other important economic effects that are also political effects, because a lot of things the political system does impacts our economy. A lot of ambitious economic programs. Our national banking system is a political decision that has economic results, obviously. Our Tariff Act, our Homestead Act, our Land Grant Act, and our Pacific Railway Act. All these are political actions that matter, but they also impact our economic results after the war. And, of course, socially, I'm going to make this argument now, and I'm going to make it for every other war going forward. Rephrase this. What groups of people always take advantage of opportunities during war? The poor. Who else? The uneducated, sure. I hear it. Women and minorities. Absolutely. So every war, we're going to have this tug of war. No pun intended. We should actually settle wars that way. Big ass tug of wars. I mean, yeah. Every war, yes, civil liberties get restricted. Like in this case, freedom of the press to a small extent, habeas corpus, absolutely. But we also see civil liberties expanding for subgroups. It's a nice way to look at the positive outcomes of war. Right, Yesenia? Right. So women play a huge role in both the North and the South, filling in for men who are off fighting or men who have died. We see women playing a huge role in this really new field of nursing. The Red Cross is established because of the Civil War. Nursing becomes really primarily a female profession, and a phenomenal one because of the Civil War. But women filling in on the home front, taking care of plantations in the South plays a huge role, and in the North, working in factories, working in jobs, taking care of the home, working at all the kinds of things that men would have been doing, but they're out fighting the Civil War. Yes?
Didn't women, like, black women also go inside the field of nursing during the war?
Absolutely.
There was segregation between?
Black women go into the field of nursing during the Civil War after the Emancipation Proclamation to be black nurses to those black fighting regiments. Absolutely. Good question. The effects, of course, this field of nursing is open to women. And eventually, in theory, it'll open the door to, at least to push for equal voting rights. Hey, remember that time in the Civil War when we helped win the war? Where are our voting rights? It'll only take, don't worry ladies, another 55 years. But that's not that long. You can wait. Other social effects, obviously the biggest group socially impacted by the Civil War is the former slaves. Why? Because slavery is over. That matters. We had 3.5 million slaves in the South, 500,000 slaves in the border states, and the 13th Amendment, do not ever forget it, ends slavery. Another social effect is this tragic human loss. There's a whole lost generation after every big war like this. Right? We lose this big of a chunk of our 18 to 30-year-old males. Think about like the impact on birth rate. Think about the impact on like the labor force going forward. Think about the impact later and later in life on other things as generations age. All right, we'll talk about this more in World War I, the lost generation, literature-wise and culture-wise. But in the Civil War, like especially in the South, we lost a whole generation of humans. And then that's going to affect the next generation because people are having less kids because there's less men. And you know, you guys don't have sex ed in class anymore. We need a man and a woman to have a child. 620,000 men died. $15 billion in war costs and damaged property. Our Southern economy is destroyed. What's the Southern economy based on? Two things. Cotton and slaves. Cotton and slaves. Slaves? Are they gone? No more slaves. We'll get into that in period 5, end of period 5 and period 6 with sharecropping. No more slaves. And now their biggest buyer of cotton, England, has gone elsewhere for their cotton. When there's more places to buy things, do prices go up or down? You think up? When there's more places to buy things? Yeah. When you have options, that creates competition. When there's competition, prices go down. So now the South was used to two things. Charging whatever they wanted for their cotton, because they were the main exporter. Charging whatever they wanted and not paying their labor. Now, they can't charge whatever they want, and at least to an extent, they have to pay their labor. So the Southern economy is ruined. Whose fault was that? Theirs. Yeah, absolutely. Not to blame where blame lies. The Civil War becomes socially, economically, and politically the catalyst, the starter, the shock to the American system that provides the push towards a modern, industrialized American economy. So, the aftermath. Now what? The extreme states' rights supporters that thought the states could do whatever they wanted, up to and including secession, due to that compact theory that these states, we made the Constitution, we can leave when we want. That compact theory is important. That compact theory is gone now. All right, it's no longer a valid theory towards interpreting the Constitution because they tried and they failed. Hence the Civil War. The national government emerges unbroken, despite it going through its tough, as Lincoln said, right? Our great democracies and looked at this experiment, two things have been settled. Creating and executing the government. The thing that hasn't been settled, which is now settled, is what the government does when it's tested and tried to be overthrown from within. Mission accomplished. Nullification and secession as ideas are kind of laid to rest. We're not going to have this issue again of states thinking they can just secede and nullify federal laws. And this preservation, this keeping of democratic ideals was subconsciously throughout the war one of the major objectives of the North. Right? The Southern, even democratic system is built much more like an aristocracy. So the North is fighting for union. If you look at Gettysburg Address, like we're here testing whether any nation of the people, for the people, by the people can long endure on this earth. And the answer is yes. So we made it 87 years up to the Gettysburg Address, and we made it more than 87 cents. With that question settled of is democracy a sustainable model in the Western world? Good. Good. Now, shockingly, I have a video for you. It's funny.
Oh my God, so funny.
Yo. If you don't want to laugh. Melody, can you stop it?